All right, can you guys hear me now? Should be good now. I apologize for the delay. This has been a crazy getting started here. The other platform I was using just completely I had problems with it. I deleted my entire presentation as I was uploading it. About 80 slides in a week and a half of going into it, but luckily I made a flow chart to go off of, and we are good to go. I've gone through it so many times now that it's okay. So basically, I will start with the referral campaigns because that is ultimately what brought a lot of you guys here, and I'm just going to go straight for that. And then I have a lot of other things prepared here that are most of them are free and low cost, and they're things that I can cover. But I'll get to that here shortly. Essentially, on this, the whole concept is basically this timeline of a threat level that has come into kind of clarity as far as how the importance of obtaining obtaining attention from any given source. And what happens is you have intent-based searches that people are making, and then you have other sources where they're spending their time. So you're going to have social media, things like that are they're platforms where people are paying attention, but due to the nature of a mortgage and the mortgage timeline. So if we were to look at a timeline, just any kind of line across here, and if over here we had this where somebody begins their purchase, this is important to understand because this is kind of the breakdown for the whole bigger picture of what's happening right now. So if somebody's starting their timeline and they start looking for a home somewhere over here, and they have they close on a deal over here, there's going to be a point in here where they find a house, and then they'll be ready to fill out a loan app. But research is showing right now that 80% of people are filling out one loan app, and 1 out of 8 people are denied on their first attempt at getting a mortgage. So what's happening is you have less than 10% of people that can get approved on their first loan app that are filling out more than one. And so people, and it's due to a few reasons. You have kind of a perfect storm of situations that are happening, and essentially it comes down to a consolidation of attention, and also concerns about personal data leaks. You have a combination of the way that people are paying attention and the way that kind of society is transpiring right now in terms of personal data concerns, and also spam. People are more concerned now and mindful about where they submit their personal information to. I'm gonna close this. All right, getting rolling now. So people are more concerned now more than ever about where they submit their personal information, and so the problem becomes people. It's not that people for whenever I first kind of came into this situation, I was thinking that, because I saw an article from Time Magazine where it said people had a shorter attention span now than ever before, and that makes sense. And I thought that was interesting, but evidence shows otherwise. So you have things like Game of Thrones, for instance. You have these series where people are spending exorbitant amounts of time, and they're doing so in a way that is not something that humans have probably done before. And so if anything, human attention span has gotten longer. It's that people have people have more options today than ever before. And so if you can hear me out through the remainder of this, and I know my slides I'd accidentally deleted as I was trying to start this today. So a little patience will go a long way today, but I do have some good stuff here. So let's start with this. That whole situation that I just explained applies to everything that I'll be explaining today, because ultimately lead generation, the whole concept of getting a person that's interested in a product of any kind, comes down to having a relevant message and delivering it at the right time and in the right way that this person is interested in, or that's relevant to their situation. And so if we were selling $20 pairs of sunglasses, we could use Facebook ads all day long, and we could target people. I mean, you can't target people with eyeballs, but essentially you could target people who are alive, because you can catch this person at the right time. No matter when you catch them, you can always sell a $20 pair of sunglasses to people, because it's not a threat to a financial situation or a lifestyle or anything like that. What's happening with the mortgage situation is people don't want a mortgage, they want the house. They have to have the mortgage if they're eligible and a candidate to discuss one with, in order to get the house. So you have a situation where people are spending all this time looking for a home, and that's ultimately the motivating factor in the situation. And once they find the home, then it becomes a situation where you have a very short timeline, maybe even as little as one search. So my ultimate kind of picture to you today is there's a lot of ways that you can drive traffic. There's a lot of ways to drive traffic and get them into a lead generation situation. But you have to drive it from a search engine if you want to get high quality traffic, because that's the only place that people are showing intent across the entire spectrum. You have other ways that people will, now ultimately, there's a couple that's the general definition of what's happening, but like on Reddit and Craigslist, for example, when you go on here, what you're responding to are people who have made posts, but this is ultimately not just about the people who are making the post. There's a lot of other people that look at their questions, and I don't know if you guys have ever been to the Reddit, to the subreddit for mortgages, but there's a lot of people that go on there. There's a lot of people that go on there and ask all kinds of questions. Some of them are local. You just go to reddit.com/r/mortgage. If you just Google mortgage subreddit, you'll find it. People go on there and ask all kinds of stuff. Your responses to their questions, and ultimately content that you make. So this is all kind of, well, here, I'm kind of scattered right now. So, but here, let's go to the Facebook campaign. I'm going to start with this versus deliver this to you afterwards. I'm not going to get too far into the Facebook manager. I just want to talk more about strategy of how to make this work for realtors. You probably don't want to use the exact same campaign that I have here if you can avoid it. You just want to use some kind of like creative variation. I mean, ultimately, if you have to use the same one, it is what it is. I blurred out personal details that are involved here, and yes. So in terms of the Google traffic, I just saw your message here, and you're welcome for doing this. I apologize for not having slides. I'm trying not to even think about it right now. I literally deleted a week and a half of work to put this together. But it's okay, because I've still got the ultimate, I've still got the general timeline. Google traffic is expensive to pay for. You're right. But there's other ways to go about generating it. And really that's the key. So you have really two you have really two other ways to go about, two general ways, and it's going to be local SEO. So anytime you make a Google search for anything, here, and I'll just address that real quick before I get into the Facebook situation. It's good to have a comparison in terms of the difference here. Let's see. Let's exit that. And if I look for any kind of mortgage situation, let's say I'm in Indiana or something. Okay, so first you have, I don't know why I don't have local stuff here, maybe because it knows I'm in Oklahoma, but if first you have the paid ads that will come first. So when you're buying traffic, you do have some bigger companies that are generally paying for the attention right off the bat, but not all of them and not every situation. Really the key, there's a program I use called SEMrush, and it breaks down search traffic. Essentially what you have is your paid traffic first, and then most of the time, here, let's just do, oh, it was just below that. Okay. So you have the paid ads first. I don't know how Yelp made it above the local search, but generally it's paid ads, and then you have the local search, and then you have the organic searches. And there's a strategic way to go about ranking all of this, but essentially on the ads, the way to get higher in the ads is essentially to have the most relevant landing page that's tied to an intent, that's tied to an ad copy. So if we were to draw this linear situation of this particular search, like let's say that somebody searched for mortgage lender OKC or Edmond or whatever, then the ad copy has to be directly relevant to the search, and then the landing page has to be directly relevant to that. But the problem is that most people will only end up running one variation of a page. So you have to have multiple variations to accommodate the various types of intent that you have in your keywords that you've identified. And so, but you're right, it is generally expensive, but it's also the highest quality traffic that you can possibly pay for if you do it the right way. It's a situation where if you do this the right way, you can custom tailor your message to accommodate the search intent that's being made, if that makes sense. So if somebody's looking for best mortgage lender, then you can give them this, you can give them a landing page and ad copy to accommodate that very specific search, and you can do basically a variation of your landing page. And then you have the ad copy that goes in line with that. That's how the quality score is what gets you higher on here. You can pay more money ultimately across your campaign and not be ranked as high because of the way they do their quality score. And it makes sense. So if you think about Google, their whole situation is they want to provide the most relevant listings. Now, I'm not sure why Academy Mortgage with 2.8 stars, this is kind of an unusual situation. If you do some other searches, you'll see that this is not normally common, but I've been to the Academy Mortgage website recently, and that could also have a factor in that. They're kind of taking my browsing history into account here. But essentially, they also have 11 reviews, so that could definitely be an accommodating factor. The way to rank this, and then I will get into the Facebook campaign, but the way to rank your local search is pretty methodical and pretty much straightforward. It's worth doing even if you're an individual loan officer from home, or even if you're a lender or broker and you have loan officers. Every one of them can create a local listing. They can do it from their house. In some cases, they'll allow you actually to do multiple listings out of the same address, because essentially you have a oh, that's good. I was going to say I might have to subscribe real quick to Zoom to finish this, but it looks like it's unlimited. You have a situation where they're taking into account how many reviews you have, and then also, see, this one has 15 reviews and it's a higher rating. I've been to this site recently, so that could have a factor in this. Companies are starting to pick up on these ad spots that you can buy at the very top. It's funny to me that AMC Mortgage is paying with no reviews, but that's what they're doing for whatever reason. Probably not ideal, or it actually looks like the reviews are moved, so they might be paying for that. They might be paying for that too. I actually wasn't aware you could do that, but it looks like that's what's happening. So in order to rank locally, your strategy, and you guys probably just want to take some notes. So I'm gonna start rapid firing. I'm starting to get in the swing of my thoughts here without the slides. So just pay attention to what I'm saying, and if you get lost in anything here, just holler at me. What's a good bid amount per click? So yeah, SEMrush.com. It really depends on the keyword that you're going after. You want to balance search traffic. So there's here, I'll get into organic here in a second. This strategy is different than organic traffic, but you should take advantage of whatever you can afford to take advantage of and whatever you can do here, because anything that you can get through Google, the thing is, this is the way people obtain information now. Bing is also important. And so Google and Bing can accommodate for 95+% of probably information inquiries from individual people looking for services these days. People aren't using the yellow pages. They don't watch TV anymore. I saw a deal where people are canceling their cable at this alarming rate. People are literally consuming their information differently, and they're going to search engines when they have this intent to get this information. And so the key is to be as present as you can, because it comes down to percentages ultimately. If you were to analyze this in hindsight, the behavior of any of people across large numbers, you can break this down into percentages that they're going to click on. So ultimately, the more visible you can be on here, the more traffic. So if you look at this as kind of a process timeline here, the more traffic that you can get into the traffic sources here, the more visible you can be, the more numbers that you'll get across here, because ultimately you're going to have like a conversion percentage, but it can only be measured in hindsight. So that makes sense. As a person moves forward, they're only making one decision, but when you look at a large group of people, you have percentages of conversions that are happening across every step. So the key is to maximize your percentage amount. So in terms of what you should bid on organic, it 100% depends on what the search is, how what the keywords are, what the search numbers are, how much other people are paying. The kind of the weird and catch-22 thing about the whole situation is, in general, the more that people are paying for a keyword, the more likely it is to be a higher producing situation, just because you're working with data that these companies have put a lot of money into to figure out. And so, but they're doing it in a very specific way. There are trends that you can see, like if you go to let's see here, if you go to like Quicken Loans is I'm going to talk, I got another thing too. on Rocket Mortgage. I just want to talk about that because any software that you have ultimately that can process digital loans, what they're doing is a marketing scheme. There's not any real, they're taking the advantages of their loan processing software and they're marketing it, but I'll get to that in a second. You have this. I don't feel too bad about it. They got a gigantic thing going on here. Providing affordable mortgages. So essentially what they're doing here is this. Oh, that's interesting. They're not doing they're still doing the one question at a time, but generally they have a dynamic form. It's interesting to see that they've switched to this because generally the dynamic form would be a thing where you just click. Now it's like a 2-click situation. So I'm not sure what instigated that change or if that's just something they have on their homepage, which is probably the case. But this is a trend, regardless of how you do it. Asking for one question at a time is a way to keep people's attention. And the way that you convert people or engage them when they come to your page is just as important as driving the traffic in the first place. You can't ultimately get to your end objective if you don't maximize both. I'll try to stick with one thought process here at a time. So to rank, I'll finish up here. So the local search, the way to rank it is to do this, is to make a search. So basically I use a tool like SEMrush. I figure out what people are searching for, and this would be more based on volume. So on SEMrush, you just look at the most common keywords. You write down which ones you want it to target. It doesn't really matter how many. This is just ultimately kind of a monotonous task. I use a plugin like LastPass, and what I do is essentially do this form fill, and that allows me to go to the form. So what I'm doing is filling out. I'm having this form fill, and I'm using that to fill out multiple requests because that's ultimately what this is about. It's a repetitive situation where you're spreading out your listing in this consistent way over as many listings as possible that are relevant to your search. And the way that you figure out that is you get to your search volume, and then you go into so I use like SEMrush, or other ways to get kind of trending searches would be to like do Google Trends. And this is kind of this is actually a way to create content too, but I'll get to that when I get down to the content section. But you are going on here, and you're looking at this volume, and you can figure out what people are searching for, and this gives you an idea. It doesn't always have to be directly about mortgage. It could be anything about buying a house or any kind of relevant process in there. But you just figure out search terms, you get the volume, you do a Google search, and then what you're doing here is you make a list of all the directory websites that come up. Anything that you can have a listing on, you want to create a listing on. But what I'll do, and this is a monotonous process, but this is ultimately, the whole thing here really comes down to a consistency thing. So in order to accommodate the way that people are changing how they collect information, you really have to create these habits that are geared towards putting out signs. And I'll get into that real quick, actually, before I actually intended to explain that first, but that's okay. Whenever I was a loan officer, I worked for a company that did basically new construction financing for, they did it for people who own land, and they were using the land as collateral for a new home purchase situation. Now, when I started working at this company, I did have real estate experience, and I had just moved back to Oklahoma City from Ohio. And it was basically this deal where I didn't really No, I just wanted to follow something that worked really. So I worked under this guy, Wayne Donnelly, who was a ninja at this particular business. And what we were doing is what we niched him was finding people who had equity in their land, and we would roll in that equity into a new construction loan, and we would build a home on their property. We would essentially take the equity and apply it to the home and land situation. We take a mortgage on their entire property, basically. And the company kind of looked at this as like a overall investment situation. It's like if people were to default on this home, obviously that's kind of the primary factor, but if people were to default, can they make their money back on this land that we're in? Sometimes people would have 20 or 40 acres or whatever, but the strategy that we used worked for me very quickly. And among this company, they had like 12 offices. They've actually changed their name. It's kind of a borderline, is this predatory lending or not kind of thing. There's several other companies in this kind of same space that have been in trouble for it, but they're kind of walking in this very gray area, because when you control the construction of the house, obviously, and you control the financing on this house, you are putting yourself in this peculiar dictating financial terms of this client, how much they're paying you situation. But while I was there, they weren't in trouble. But essentially the strategy is something to pay attention to, because this is something that is not an online strategy, but it is a metaphor for things that you can do online. And it's also a specific strategy that can be used by a lot of people. But essentially the thing that he told me to do was, if we're not writing up a loan, then we go out and we put out signs. And so these are physical, they're physical signs with they have like a wood post, and then you would have like this slat thing that would slide over the post. And we would go make hundreds of these signs every week. And then we go out to rural areas outside of Oklahoma City, and we would post the signs up on corners all over. And basically what it said was like, build a home on your land, no money down. And then it had like the disclosures at the bottom. And our entire strategy, very simple. We figured out what's the most effective thing that we can do to drive relevant traffic to call us and make meetings with us. And so when he simplified this into this amazingly simple science, but when we weren't writing up deals, when we didn't have meetings, or if we were on our way to meetings out, and they're all rural Oklahoma situations where people had been gifted this land or whatever, and on our way to the meetings or on our way back, we would go post these signs up everywhere. So we would put signs up all over rural Oklahoma on our way to and from these meetings, and anytime we didn't have any appointments. Now the company would pay for these signs, and so we could put up as many as we would go and put up. And so his whole strategy was like, take advantage of this resource, put these up all the time. And I'll get to your directory question here in a second. If you have a loan product, you probably don't have something like this land situation. But if you have a HUD situation where you're doing no money down, buying a house, it's something to think about. We had people that were calling us from these signs. This is an offline strategy, and this is kind of a jump from where I'm at here, but it does apply to what I'm about to talk about. We would put these signs up everywhere, and the city would ultimately take them down, so they wouldn't be up for long. But what would happen was we'd put them up, generally towards the end of the week. I would make it a heavy effort to put these things up, because the city would come through at some point during the week, and they'd take down most of them. But we'd have some that were just these rogue signs that we'd have up for a long time that they wouldn't get to. And so by doing this consistently, we had hundreds of signs. You couldn't really drive out of Oklahoma City without seeing these things. And they were designed in a way that caught people's attention, in a way that got them to make this call. And so the signs themselves are something that is a, and I became among like 40 loan officers for this company. Really, we were selling houses, but we had to have our license. For like out of like 40 across 12 offices, I was the number 2 producer within a couple months. And it was just because I followed his lead on going and putting these signs out, and people would not just follow the system that worked. I don't know why, but I just went out and did that, met with people, and we had like some certain things, criteria about making meetings and stuff, but I just followed their lead and it worked. But the metaphor for putting out the signs, it's not something that'll work in every situation for mortgage, obviously. But the mortgage, the thought process behind that is important. It's like when you're not writing up loans, you put out signs. Well, how do you put up signs in a digital world where people are using Google? And that is what this is about. So when you don't have any loans to write up, or you just have a spare hour or two, anything that you can do to put yourself in a position where you are getting Google traffic from just efforts that you can just do. It's just a thing that you can do consistently, and you should do consistently, where you're just writing about stuff. You're just creating content. You just take a stance on any topic in your business, anything that you see that people are doing, or a story that you have to tell, or anything, and you just create content. So, and the way that you figure out the relevant content is to, how many directories is enough? That's kind of a funny question, because you can, the directory listings that you do are directly relevant to this ranking, and so are the consistency. So there's really like a few factors that they take into consideration here. Consistency of the listing itself is a big one. So you want the name, address, phone number to be the same, and also the way that the listing is here, that's the same way that you want to list it on every directory if possible. You want this just to be consistent, the phone number and everything. And you can do this as a loan officer. You can put your name. What I actually recommend is taking the Rocket Mortgage kind of thing into consideration. And I know it's probably not a fun topic to even mention them, but you're taking, all they're doing is taking the loan software they have access to. They probably own it, but not everybody has to own it to even do this. I was looking at this yesterday, and I thought this was interesting. All they're doing is taking their loan processing software and the fact that people want to fill out loans quickly, and they've marketed their entire situation about it. Rocket Mortgage is just this marketing scheme of Quicken Loans, but it's like this thing that's actually really funny to me, because it's not something that Quicken Loans isn't. I mean, I would assume they're not using anything different than what Quicken Loans does. This is literally just it's just a marketing scheme. But it's funny to me because people know about it enough to make it work, but all they're doing is taking their loan processing software and they're emphasizing that in their site presence here. So that's kind of, you can do this too, though. The key is to find, so I'm putting out the signs. You need a website in order to be found here. So in this consolidation of attention where people are going to Google, you have to put out your signs when you don't have loans to write up. But the way you do this online, the physical signs are cool too. Really, you should do anything and everything you can do to take advantage of what's happening here. The way that you put out your signs just has changed. So people are looking differently, and ultimately it's the exact same kind of scenario where you have traffic that's going through an area and you're putting out signs, and a certain percentage of people will see them, and that's how things happen. But you have to have your signs up in order to get seen. It's like if you're not in it, you can't win it, and that's just the way that this is set up. So so the more content you can create, if you're the type of person that is opinionated about your loan products, then I would highly recommend this. And really the kind of the strategy. So you need a consistent site to run on, and really having a link that goes to like you want first of all like a chatbot situation that would pop up and it would qualify them. And this is as important as having a quality landing page, as having content. It's equally as important. The key is to engage the visitor in a conversation versus having them fill out a form or doing something where they feel like they're just committing to this thing. You just kind of pop up and give a relevant inquiry / engagement into the situation. And the cool thing about doing it like this is that you can filter out next steps. So you allow them to feel like they're in control, but really all you're doing is allowing them to go through this. You're allowing them to go through this process of talking with a chatbot that filters the way that they communicate with you moving forward. You're basically putting them in control of how the situation moves forward. And so you have to create the content. People will find your blog posts. It just needs to be aggregated. You have to do it consistently, and it has to be something that you just start to. The thing is that people in the mortgage business generally don't like. Now after doing this a year or so and doing it a lot of different ways, I can see kind of what's happening. And the problem is that people want these immediate results with the leads, and you can get them almost immediately if you do AdWords, if you're doing search engine traffic advertising. But the problem with doing search engine advertising is that the value that's retained by running ads on on a search engine or anywhere else, really, the value goes to zero immediately after running the ad. So if you look at it from the situation of you're putting this money in here, so it's like this timeline of where you're spending your marketing dollars. If it's done the right way, AdWords can be very effective, but you're right, it's very expensive. It's also something that not everybody should even try. Really, if you don't have at least $10,000 that you can put into just investing in setting up the campaigns, running ads to optimize the data on the landing pages and on the ads, you shouldn't even, if you can't do that and like sleep okay at night and not worry about it, shouldn't even mess around with it. It's not something that's worth even exploring. And the reason is that it is expensive, and it's also not a process that putting more pressure onto needing to speed up results or wanting things faster is going to help. In fact, it does the opposite. I've been involved with campaigns where I'm working with, there was one particular lender where he just insisted on things. Well, so it took about 2 weeks to get his campaigns up and running, but the problem became, I think he had some personal issues going on. It just became the situation where there was a peak and he was super excited. And then there was a problem with the chatbot. But we found that out after having a steep decrease in the way that the leads were coming in. So we had this ad budget, and we can see all the metrics on the campaign. And all of a sudden, everything's going super well. He gets super excited, and then it just plummets the next day. Well, as soon as I see that, I just turn off the campaign until we figure it out. That's really kind of the best way to do it. Well, that way we're not wasting ad budget with this problem that we have going on. The key is to figure it out, fix it, do it the right way, and then turn everything back on. But the problem is when you're in this situation where you're frantic, or you've made an investment maybe you're not comfortable with or whatever, you get in this mode where you need things to happen faster. But the only way to make things happen faster on search engine ads is to increase your ad budget. It's a function of time and money. So in this forward progression of time, you have a money expenditure per. You can break it down in whatever kind of segment you want, but it's ultimately how much money are you spending, and what are you getting back? And you're going to have in hindsight, you can always measure this. So you're going to have a certain expenditure, and then you go back and you say, okay, well, how much did I get this lead for? But really, that's a measure going back. Obviously, it's not something that you can say, well, how much is it going to be moving forward? Because it's not really like that. It's a situation where some people will respond, some people won't. And what you're doing is putting yourself in a position to maximize those numbers, but also you can't have this emotional attachment to what's happening. So this guy was freaking out. He's like, it worked. It was working so good. Now it slowed down. And I'm like, yeah, I turned it off. Couldn't figure it out. But he was like, no, we need the leads back on. So he did this thing where he's calling us every 20 minutes to figure this thing out. And that doesn't work. So we had to have a coming to Jesus talk at one point, because the problem is that in order to get the leads to come back on, we have to turn on these campaigns that now have this problem. And so we're just going to take off the conversion tool and then hope that things work. And ultimately we did that for this guy because he's just not pleasant to deal with. But I learned a lot. It was important that I had this experience, because it's not for everybody. If the ads can't be run and done so in this way that you can just back off, move on with life, it has to be like a dispendable income, honestly. It has to be a thing that you can just let go of, and it's okay if nothing comes back, because what you're doing is buying data from Google to optimize these ads. And we can get it optimized, but if you have this attachment to this investment that you're making in this, then it's not good. You don't even want to mess with it, because the only way to improve it in your mind is going to be to put pressure on the person who's running the ad, whether it's me or somebody else or whatever, or if you try to do it on your own. But the problem in doing it like that is that as you put more pressure on, all you can do is turn up the budget. That's it. You have if you want to increase your conversions in any kind of given way on search engine ads, you can just increase your budget. You can turn it down. You can measure the results you have and then optimize based on A/B testing that you've been doing all the ads. Everything should be A/B tested across everything you do. So you can do this measurement and optimization thing kind of in hindsight, but that's the only thing you have very little control in terms of what's actually happening. And really the bigger picture to all of this is kind of understanding that aspect. It's like in life, a lot of times we feel like we're in control of stuff. Like today I deleted like 80 slides I made for this. It happened and there was no way to get it back. I was using this platform called It's Beautiful.ai, like this interactive thing. But sometimes problems happen like that. Ultimately, you can put in the effort. You can do what you're doing. And you can, to a certain extent, you can control if you screw up something. But you can't control if an underwriter is going to process something or if a client doesn't show up for a meeting. All you can do is make these consistent efforts to get discovered and do what you do. And at the end of the day, you have to just leave it alone and trust and understand that people are doing the best that they can do. And at a certain point, that's it. Can't dwell on stuff, because if you do that, then you're going to fall into this mindset where you can't get back into the mode that you need to be in order to create content that gets found by people. The thing is, like, I'm kind of jumping around here, but I'll close the thought out about local SEO without slides. It's kind of funny here, but I at least have this on my mind. So if the local search situation is you want to go through the first 3 pages. So there's really not a number of how many directory listings you're making here. I'll get to organic again. I just want to close this out before I get there. You make a list of all the directory on the organic search results. So this is to rank on local, which you want to do. Even if you're an individual loan officer, whoever you are, make a listing of all the directory sites that come down here. You go down, I'm not sure what some of these are, but if you can have a profile on any of them, just write it down on your list, go to the second page, go to the third page, and just make a list of all the sites that you can have a profile on. Angie's List is one, Yellow Pages. The higher the rank, the more important it is to have a listing, and that's and you make a list of all those. Then you go make the consistent listings that match your Google local listing. And thank you so much. I just saw your note here, Alex. I appreciate it. Any chatbot recommendations? 5 people. I have a guy who can build an awesome bot for prequels. Awesome. Yeah. So I make chatbots too. It's a situation where the whole. So I just started this thing called iFunnel. It's iFunnel.app is the website, and I just got. I completely forgot about this, but this takes some of this pressure off. I was stressing too much about the slides, but there's a program called Techstars. It's like a tech accelerator, and I just got invited back for a second round of applications, which is a good start. But ultimately, this whole situation that I figured out here, the problem with all of this is that current solutions make this situation that I'm describing very spread out. So if you want to, I'll just finish this thought and then I'll get back to the organic SEO. Essentially on the local SEO, you just want the consistent listings. You want the listings to go to a page that has some type of conversion tool in place. And then you want to, you want to have the consistency everywhere and spread across the most amount of points as possible. On the organic search, your objective is you need a platform where you can create content and publish it, and your objective in doing that is to resolve intent that people are making. And the way that you do that, I have more specifics on this, is to break down questions that people are asking. Quora is important, Quora. If you're not familiar with the site, I recommend that you do get familiar. The answers to the questions that I have on here might catch you off guard if you get on here, but that's okay. I'm on a different life mission at this point. So you basically want to answer these questions that people are asking. And so the way that you do that, you can see what people are interested in because you can see how many people follow these questions. And it's just kind of a small segment of the population, but people who ask questions in these kind of unique ways. People ask questions like this. If you have something to say about that, you do some search. So basically a good way to go about this would be to figure out what people are asking on here that you have some kind of value to add or an opinion about, something that you've seen, mistakes that people make, anything like that. You just kind of go on here, see what kind of questions people are asking. Then you go on SEMrush and you do a inquiry into what kind of search volume people have on the keywords that are particular to this. So you might look up mortgage banker or whatever's relevant to your situation, or you might look up between a registered mortgage, equitable mortgage. You just kind of look up these things, and the key, taking this one step back, you don't want to skip over this because this is all really important. What you want to do is think about the loan products you have. This is kind of a whole connected situation. You want to think about what's the highest value loan products that I have to offer, and you need something unique. So you have to have something that provides real value to the people, to borrowers, and that gives some kind of distinct advantage over other things that are available. And you want to identify a profile that goes with that. So like an ideal borrower profile that goes direct. So if you have your loan products, and then you have your borrower profile that's directly in line with who would benefit the most from these specific loan products, and then basically you have questions that they ask at each point of their journey. So based on this profile, how is this person going to go about researching these specific topics that they're going to be addressing throughout their buying process? Now, the more specific or particular your loan product is, the more important it is to do content. And so what I'm saying is basically, if you do commercial mortgages, or if you do any type of like, let's say you do alternative lending. I've worked in situations like this where you're targeting people who can't get approved by a bank, and you want to, and I'm going over my 1:30 mark here too. I'll try to wrap this up before an hour and a half, but I want to get as comprehensive as I can here. You want to figure out the intent of these people. Then you want to create content that resolves their intent. So they're going to find you whenever they make searches. And the thing about searches are that people are not searching the same way. A lot of times, like on SEMrush, your search is what they call it's like a query, it's like a phrase match search. So if somebody searches for, like if you put if mortgage is your keyword, people who search for mortgage banker will be included in those numbers. People who search for mortgage leads, mortgage securities, and the intent that goes with those are completely different. Of course, if somebody's looking for mortgage leads or mortgage lender, their intent will be on two opposite sides of the spectrum. So, but it's important to understand that, because the numbers that you're getting on there can have different search intents associated with them. But it's also important to understand that people search for things. It's like something like 75% of searches are made in completely new ways. People are searching using completely different terms. The way that the words that they're using and what they're typing into the box is completely new, like some kind of original thing that people are doing. And it's this complexity of the human brain that's happening. Essentially, people have a very complex way of going about researching information. And this is a good thing, because the content that you create doesn't need to be optimized for search engines. A lot of times people try to do this over SEO thing where they try to do keyword stuffing or whatever. You can't do any of that anymore. But it's a good thing too, if you actually have a voice and you have something unique to say, or just anything, a stance. If you take any kind of stance on any kind of situation, it's a good thing, because the words that you're using are going to be unique to the way you're saying something and the words that people are using to search. So it's like the words, if I put in, mortgage lender on Google, I'm going to see all these huge lenders and stuff. But the topics, the more that specific people get in the way that they're searching, the more that your search is going to have prevalence in the search engine, because the words that are being used in the way that they're searching is going to be more in line with what you're doing. But the key to that is, don't optimize for the search engine. Don't try to do anything abnormal. Optimize for the human, and really just have a general, just all you're using the tools for are to find general topics to write about, and then finding a consistent habit that you can follow on an ongoing basis that is something that you can just duplicate on, over and over. It's like putting out your signs or whatever. You're just creating content that can be found by Google, and you want to do this on an ongoing basis, because really what you're doing is you're obtaining market share. And really your market share is this attention that you're capitalizing on. And the way you do that is by taking up more room on search engines in terms of where people can spend their attention. And you can do this for free almost. You have to, you need a website that can convert. The chatbot's important. having this engaging process is important. But you need, so it shouldn't be just like a blog thing. You really want to consider how you do your branding too, because it's okay to have like your name tied to things, but you don't want to make it too personalized. You want to have this image of, a person that wrote the article, or you can pay, me or some other company to do this. I offer full turnkey content generation, chatbot, all this stuff, and I'll get to iFunnel in a second, which kind of summarizes this whole thing. But you want to just create the content and do it on an ongoing basis. And in order to do that, you really just need a website that converts and a platform that you can put out your words. Now, there's ways to go about creating the content, which are worth considering. If you use an app called Evernote, I'm a big Evernote fan. Essentially, you can voice dictate your words. So you pick a topic and you go on the app and you just start explaining yourself, and then you go on your computer with the Evernote app and you edit it, and that kind of gives you a quick way to create content that's easy. You just use Evernote, use voice dictation, and you can just talk, and then you can go on and edit it on your computer, and then you can post stuff. You want to use original pictures and do this whole just original thing that you're doing online. So iFunnel is kind of a accumulation of all of this that I'm talking about. The problem with current software solutions is that in order to do PPC ads on search engines, in order to have a content inbound marketing platform, and in order to engage people with a chatbot, you have 6 or 7 different software applications and subscriptions that are required. And really it's to serve this one purpose of attracting the right visitor with the right message. All I've done, most likely you found me through this way, but all I've done to get clients, here over the last year for mortgage lead generation services is write 5 or 6 articles. That's all I've done. I did have some content in place prior to that, so that helped. But I've gotten like 500 inquiries, and until last week, I hadn't paid for any advertising. I just kind of messed around with some Gmail ads. But but with that said, it kind of paints a picture of what can happen whenever you start to create content on a regular basis. But the problem is, if you want to have a platform that engages people, that will host your content, that you can plan your ads on in this way that's directly relevant and this thing that's not too confusing. And if you want variations of the chatbot that will be directly relevant to the content on the page, you're having to use like 6 or 7 different software applications to do the research, to from hosting the site to hosting the content, or to doing the actual content, basically displaying the content to visitors, to designing the landing pages, to all of these things. It's a disconnected situation currently. So what I did was created iFunnel.app. I just registered the domain, made a little landing page, and then I submitted an application to Techstars, because ultimately this idea is something that will simplify a process that's too disconnected right now. The way that it currently works is you would have to go on one platform and design variations of the chatbot, then go assign a variation to different pages, and it's a very complicated, disconnected process. And ultimately, it requires all these subscriptions to things that are completely disconnected. And I've got this clear vision of how it'll play out in this single sales funnel that will essentially, your chatbot will always know where somebody's at in the process, so you'll have this relevant message that gets portrayed. HubSpot would be the closest thing that I'm aware of to something like this, but it's still too disconnected. It's not designed to do this specific kind of thing. And so, I presented this to, I filled out one app to get involved in this accelerator program with Techstars, and they responded, and they invited me back for a second round of application, which is pretty amazing. They get a lot of applications, and there's like a 2-round process. So the fact that they got back to me is pretty impressive. But I know I have some. Whoops! I know I have something that will be a game changer in terms of what's required in this. The problem is that the entire situation that it takes to make this happen is just too disconnected. There's too many moving pieces for most people to be able to manage it in-house. And my objective is to put the resources in place to address this situation so that it can be managed in-house, so you don't have to hire these people to do this. And yeah, the Techstars thing is super exciting. I'm like super, yeah, I don't even really know how to explain myself. I'm so excited about it, and I can see it so clearly that it's just a thing that I love, and it's and I've got a pretty clear picture of how this will go down. So that would be called iFunnel. So what I'm doing with this has been kind of a discombobulation of a situation, but I've kind of trekked my way through most of this. The important thing to understand on here is that in order to get the realtor referrals, you want to engage in active reciprocity. So you want to give the value in ways that you can do this. These signs, there's ways to approach this that can be creative. You can do like a text to find a home situation. I would recommend just maybe brainstorming. You want to get involved in this situation where you're offering them something that they can't get elsewhere, obviously. The Facebook ads are a good start, but if you have other things that you can give them, the more you can fire up their business, essentially, you can be in a position to, receive back from them. There's text messaging bots that you can use for yourself. If these signs are applicable to you that I was talking about, you can create the signs. You can have a text message thing where people opt in, text messaging to this 4-number situation. And then you we'll do like an SMS bot. So it'll just text message them back and forth. And that will kind of further qualify them. It's not even something I've tried, but it's an idea that I think has some interesting possibilities. And so that's kind of the picture of how these referrals can go down. You just want to create systems for filtering and funneling attention to the realtors, and that way they can do the filtering of the quality of the leads, and then they can funnel them back to you whenever it's time. That way you're not fumbling around with low quality leads, which is what you'll get from Facebook. You have to, because you're reeling back this intent level. So in moving the intent back to accommodate a larger audience, you have to reel back the offer. So this is kind of the other way to look at this, is that you have a certain point at which a person could become a high quality lead. And let's say we define this person as being within 90 days of being able to fill out an app. In order to obtain that lead, this is just kind of coming out in the way it is, but in order to obtain that lead, you have to reel back your threat level of the situation to obtain this attention from this specific person. And in order to do that, you have to move back the timeline that's associated with that lead. So in using Facebook, for instance, if we did like a population distribution of, hopefully this isn't too far overboard, but let's say this is like the entire, this is a timeline, and you would have a graph essentially that would measure where everybody's at in this timeline. And this would be a hindsight thing. It's like, okay, on this date, how far away was this person from being ready to fill out an app or buying a house, essentially. In order to catch people in this last 90 days of this process, you can't do it consistently with a message on Facebook that either increases the threat or the threat level and says, because essentially if you want people to fill out a loan app, or you want to offer this solution that they would fill out a loan app for, you are presenting a situation which has a very high perceived threat level. And you can't just reel back Well, so you can't just do the higher threat level to an audience that's not accommodated for, because they're not showing intent to do that. So you can do that, but you're gonna have a very low response rate. You're not gonna get any leads into this process because on the grander scale of a population, you have very few people that are in this last 90 days of this process, if that's how you would define a high quality lead. And so in order to so out of the entire population spectrum that would be identified as Facebook as being, in this audience that's worth reaching out to, you have a very small population in this last 90 days. And even if they are in the last 90 days, they're not showing intent to find you on there. So that's why you have to use these avenues to generate business for realtors, because it is not because there's ultimately, this person is going to show intent when they're ready to have the conversation, and they're not showing intent on Facebook. So you're having to reel back the whole situation in order to get leads in at a very cheap price. And that's kind of in going back to the lead magnet that I gave for the realtors. This would be a good time to discuss this. What we're doing essentially, the emojis are important here. You put in your state. A buyer's club is a good idea to use on here. You can also do real estate deals. You can do the overall intent of this, and the overall concept of using this to generate real estate leads is that you have a group that is directly targeted to the specific type of you have a group that's targeted to the specific type of targeting that you want to go after. Since you have to target people in this with this lower threat level situation, the deals are perfect because you know that these people are into home shopping network, that they're into this getting deals in their life type thing, HGTV, realtor.com, these type of people, then you target them with the deals. Any relevancy that you can tie in between these two is going to be good. So however else, people who want to save money is generally a good call, because most people want to do that. And if you target them in this way that they're likely to be in this group, now you'll notice here, real estate is kind of their behavior, and then excluded. So these are not people who have been identified as being likely to be a first-time home buyer or anything. These are just people who are interested in shopping, and we're excluding these people here, because out of any population, you will have some people that are thinking about buying a house at, if people buy a house every 5 years, you will have some portion of the population that will have it. But that's the way that this group goes. So whenever leads are all over the place, it kind of starts to paint this picture of why whenever you have people who are all over the place. The chatbot, so this is kind of just a breakdown of here. If you have questions about this, just ask me. On the chatbot, the way that I have this broken out, so if you go to fogpusher.com/webinar pricing, I'll extend this slightly, but my objective here is I have a handful of clients that this situation has worked for, but in order to do the software, I'm looking for more case studies. So what I'm doing is I've cut all the prices in half for services that I offer. And what happens here is these are half. So if you go to the pricing, fogpusher.com/pricing, that is the normal page here. I'm offering a situation where I teach everything. I'm going to create a course, and you'll have lifetime access to this. For $2,500, I'll teach you about everything that I'm talking about here. Go into the web design aspects, how to do the chatbot step by step. Literally, you'll be able to compete with what I'm doing in the marketplace. After about 8 weeks, I figure it's going to take to get this information out. I'm not going to use Webinar Jam. I'm going to do it on a platform that I'll record, and I'll also do live streaming. but I'll get that figured out, unlike I did today. And so this is something that I'm offering today. It's basically a steeply discounted situation where I teach you. If you have a web staff, I will teach them how to do this. Anything that I can teach, I will teach in here that's directly relevant to this. And then the done for you solutions, I'm doing basically, I have a point system where these kind of equate to content, web design, inbound marketing, chatbot design, dynamic form, integrating your forms and your lead forms and your CRM system. Basically, this would be for PPC ads and for inbound marketing. This is going to be for everything on the right. Now, this is for life. I'm discounting these half off of what I'm doing these for. Now, I'm not buying new cars or anything. This doesn't make any difference to me whether you do this or not. The software is ultimately my objective at this point in the game, but right now is an ideal time to have found me and to have been involved in this presentation. So you're kind of getting on the ground floor in terms of the way that I have this set up. Now, this page breaks down a lot of stuff here, but ultimately I haven't changed anything else on the page. I just changed the top, but everything that I'm doing is half off, discounted for the remainder of the lifetime of what I'm doing here. So you're basically investing in the fact that this is the way that people have changed their attention and the way that they do things, and it's not changing in any kind of way anytime soon. And if it does, then I'll be on top of that too, because this is basically what I'm doing with my life at this point. So you have if you follow the steps that I have here, you will, it will be a positive situation for you to get involved in. There's just no way that it wouldn't, because I'm covering all the avenues that it takes to obtain attention from high quality borrowers in today's information gathering environment. So I do all of this, so it's put me in a unique situation to kind of come up with a software idea and create this solution. But that's the way that this is set up. If you guys have questions, yeah. So lifetime is literally what it is. The lifetime information on the DIY program would be, I'll give you templates for the chatbot, the templates for landing pages. I'll give you templates for the ads, and then teach you the local SEO, on-page SEO, off-page SEO strategy. This is going to be a full course that I'm going to break down of mortgage lead generation, and this will be and I'm just going to record everything over about 8 weeks, and so that will give you and or employees the ability to do this. This is a retainer situation, and this is kind of the way this is set up. Simplifies the need to figure out things ahead of time, but essentially, in order to do any kind of, every situation will be different. So some people have a website, some people don't. Some people need a platform to create content on, and so the way that I've structured this is to basically enable people to get in kind of at the ground level of this, and take advantage of the fact that I am kind of just launching this thing on this webinar. I haven't mentioned this publicly or even discussed it. I just found out about the Techstars thing last night, and they need me to fill out the second round of their forms by Sunday. So it's kind of a quick thing, but no matter what happens on that, this is something that I continue to pursue. And 97 clicks for real estate listing. Yeah, there are ways, and we've had campaigns where they're like $1 something per click. Really, it comes down to this ad copy, setting up the ads right. The thing is that in doing lead form ads, you're also not really taking advantage of the money for the education is honestly the way to do it, because if you put yourself in a situation where you're relying on me or on somebody else to generate leads for you, I'm willing to even point you in the right direction to set this up, because ultimately I can do it, but there's other people that can do it too. But if you put yourself in the situation where you're dependent on, which even in done for you situations, the ability for me to not make you dependent on me is kind of limited, because it's just a situation where I'm creating assets for you that have to be managed in some form or fashion. And if you don't take this approach of just doing things for yourself head on, then you're putting yourself in a position, whether it's me or somebody else, to somewhat be dependent on another entity for your success to generate leads. Exactly. Teach a man to fish. That's exactly what I'm doing. I've just basically gone down this life trajectory, which has enabled me to learn this and get this wide perspective, from having my real estate license to being involved in the mortgage business to having insurance experience to having this broader perspective, which essentially I obtained, but prior to having getting involved in the digital marketing side of things. And so so I will help you in every capacity that I'm capable of on this. If you have web guys on staff, if you are a web guy, or if you want to be, this will put you in a situation where you will have the skills that you need to be able to generate leads forever moving forward and not be dependent on anybody else for this. So if we were talking about value, there's really not even a way to value it, because the nature of information gathering has just completely changed, and it's really not going to, unless people quit using search engines for some reason and we go to some kind of even if that happens, it's going to be some kind of voice activation type thing where people are going to simplify and continue streamlining. So it's still going to be a search engine. I guess I say that. I can't imagine how else people could possibly use technology to get information, but it'll always be some type of query being made and information being provided thing. As far as I can see it now, I'm not sure if technology would be capable of correcting that, but the situation is really just this thing where you want to put yourself in a position to generate them for yourself. Really, you're only doing a disservice if you don't do that. If you guys have any other questions, just feel free to holler at me. I could keep going through this. I started about 30 something minutes late. We're at about an hour and a half now. If there are any specifics on anything, just holler at me. I'm not even sure who all's here. If anybody is, let's see. Got Alex, Christensen Financial, Lori hanging out. Thank you guys for hanging in, by the way. I was freaking out whenever this thing started. I literally I dropped about 70 slides. It was like 70 something, 80 slides that I worked for about a week and a half on. And so I trucked through this in this unplanned way, but it was not the way that I intended it for it to go. But that's okay. I just had to. I literally had to regather myself at the beginning because I was not. I was not certain how I was going to handle that at the beginning, but sometimes you just have to roll with the punches. And yeah, I'm trying to think. Let's see what else I had to cover. All of these areas have really kind of limitless ways that you can approach and angles you can look at it from. The short form prequal app is super important in this process because what I found is that younger people, primarily, younger 30s, 20s, will be much more difficult to get to have a conversation early in the process. Like, it's like if you want them to pick up a phone and if you want them to pick up a phone and have a conversation with you, then you are at a disadvantage because the idea isn't to make them do this. The idea is to filter their intent based on the way that they answer your questions here. And you can really filter it any number of ways. Now, my thought, theory, etc. on this chatbot situation is that you do not want to get into like calculators and things like that, because the idea is really to get straight into the questions. You want to qualify and get straight into this situation of asking the right questions and doing so in a very direct way, because you can give people resources for loan apps. You can do this whole you can do this thing where you provide those resources on your website, which is great. You should do that. You should not really overcomplicate your chatbot thing, because the conversation should really be just directed to get people directly into asking them the right questions. Because if you don't do that, you get them engaged in this conversation, but they're doing some other stuff that doesn't matter anyway. You're not collecting their information. You're engaging them in this thing that is less, it's really less effective and less user-friendly than it would be to give them the same delivery through a chatbot. I mean, really, a chatbot's kind of, it's like you're asking them for specific parameters and things, but even on a form calculator, you can ask people, people can fill it out easier. So they're in a situation where they can get their information quicker if you just do it on a page. And really, that one of the functionalities of the chatbot that I found particularly useful is to just kind of navigate people around the site. So after they fill it out, you can do these things where it'll say, you kind of classify their intent maybe in 3 or 4 ways and say, do you, what other types of information can I help you with? And even if it's just used to navigate people around the site, it just provides a little bit extra functionality after you've collected their information. And really the idea here is to measure the intent of the searcher. So you want to kind of scale or measure where is this person at in their buying timeline? How urgent of a situation is this right now? What kind of financial situation are they in? Really, after you get their specific information on, contact information, anything about their particular situation, then you can ask whatever questions you want. And so the idea really should be to ask what are the most ideal data points to collect on this person in terms of, the lead score is good. There are some programs out there, and I'll like for the education thing. I mean, I'll get into what I'll ultimately do is take a kind of a vote on what are we going to cover in the shorter. And if you don't have an opinion, you can just kind of roll with it. But I have a feeling that maybe the direct referral strategies might be, you know, highly because ultimately you can do all this other stuff, but you are in going this on to the left here. What you're doing is really putting out this message. So if we were to draw like a, I don't know, this isn't really a funnel, but I don't even, let's see how we do this. So if we were to draw like a, man, this thing is kind of crazy. This thing where we were to look at this from a, holy crap, from a standpoint of bringing people into this situation. You're going to have a larger portion of the population that will come here at the top, and what you're doing is pushing as many people into the front and then optimizing your conversions throughout. But the thing about doing this for a realtor is that they are essentially handling the time. So it comes down to this thing where in this situation, you are, because potentially here at the end, and this is something I didn't really break off here, is as a lead, like a lead magnet. So if people are not prepared maybe to fill out a short form app, maybe they're still looking for a home, but they just happen to stumble into your offer at somewhere along here, then there is a lead magnet involved here. So you would have a situation where there's a couple things I've been kind of in making this webinar thing that I didn't have slides for, that I deleted my slides for. But in making that, there were actually some points about how to look at the whole situation that kind of came into pretty clear perspective. iFunnel was one of them. Another one was about how that type of presentation can actually be used for home buyers. So, meetup.com. So if you go to Meetup, you have these groups where people, no, it's not really that fun. But the thing is, if you look at, there's a way to approach this that I think is less uncomfortable for their, no, it's definitely not really that much of a fun thing. For people who have an offer that is, let's see, how do I get into these? There's a way to structure this where you're basically, all you're doing is taking the structure of the way that some of these bigger groups that have larger opt-ins that they've used, and you are you're setting this up in a way that you're just doing it online. So see, I probably have to log in. This is a way to answer questions for people, because sometimes people maybe don't want to do like a one-on-one thing. Maybe they're kind of early on, but they still want to learn. The thing is, like, if you can figure out aspects of the loan products and the clients that you service, if you can figure out aspects of this process and of this offer that the Gay Bi Men Social Group. Interesting. There's an art festival in my neighborhood this weekend. It's a pretty big deal around here, and they got some interesting events going on. So let's see, first time home, or just do home buyer. Some of these are worth looking at because there's just so many people that they get involved, and it's amazing to me that they're able to do this. But I looked at this the other day and I was pretty impressed. The thing is, if people want to attend this right now, there's limited situations where people can do it live and still have their needs met. So how in the hell did I do this? So I'll meet up real estate. it was like a home buyer thing. Let's see. Home. See groups. Okay, here we go. So what I did is find a meetup, and then what I did was sort by most active. I saw some with like over 100 people registered for these things. But ultimately, what you want to do is just, if you're interested in providing information like this, it doesn't appeal to everybody. It is something that some people will be interested in shopping this way. So it's an important thing to think about. Sip and sell home buyer technology event. I saw some that were these big Buffalo real estate, free real estate advisor. Anything that a realtor really can do to offer kind of this upfront buying process. I mean, ultimately you want to be able to provide value and help people in this way that they need assistance. And if you know something about the buying process that they're not keen to, or that you find a lot of mistakes that people are making, you can essentially just craft this information that you are delivering. It's like how to obtain this without wanting this. So you're, or without having this thing that they don't like. And if you see people making a lot of mistakes in a certain area or doing things just in a less than ideal way, I guess what is a mistake at the end of the day, then you can catch attention, you can teach them a better way of doing things, and you can do it in this way that people will pay attention. But the problem with the meetup groups, most of them, is that you actually have to go to a place to meet. So I'm not sure how many of these meetup groups are accommodating the Growing Bible Slack Stack group. Oh, my bad. I just saw this. Let's see. Have not seen that hack before for hyper social content. Slack Stack updated, uploaded a file. Growing Bible. Sweet. Well, I don't think I have anything in particular. I'll probably wrap up here unless you guys have anything else. If you do, holler at me. Hey, no problem. I'm glad you liked it. I know you had some concerns. The thing is, like, how do you know that this works versus something else? And that's kind of an important thing to address. I know a lot of people have tried things that haven't. It's important to understand that this isn't really about my method or anything else. This is just really about understanding that this is the way that people are obtaining information. And the reason that your other lead providers have not, and I meant to cover this, but the reason that your other lead providers can't follow through is because that people are, so like I've had lead people here in the last few days that have been reaching out to me to try to sell me mortgage leads. And it's so funny to me because I know that they're not running AdWords campaigns to get these people at this time. And it's like people say, you know, if you want to get good leads in a lot of contexts, like I was listening to Gary Vaynerchuk a couple of days ago, and he's talking about how Facebook lead is the best traffic you can get. And it's a very good source of traffic in a lot of contexts. It's not good for mortgage leads. It's in fact, there's some things like ClickFunnels, for instance, their whole package from Russell Brunson is like this whole thing about this whole situation about obtaining this like high quality traffic and getting people into your funnel and stuff. And it's the premise of that is good, but the implementation and the relevancy to the mortgage business is flawed tremendously, because it's not about getting these people who are targeted in this way into a funnel. It's really about these people who are at the right time, because ultimately if somebody finds your Facebook ad or they find you, period, at a point that's way earlier in the process than at a point where they're ready to make this intent-based search, then they're going to opt into whatever you have. And particularly if they're younger, then whenever it comes time to make a Google search for their intent that they actually have to fill out an app, they're probably going to make sure this is the right thing they've done, particularly if you did some type of push marketing tactic where you put your message in front of them at a time where they were not making an intent to find it. So if you offered them free information about if you offer them free information about down payment assistance that is available to purchase a home, then you are not really doing anything that, even if you throw in additional information as you deliver that content about your products, you're really not catching them in a way that is, first of all, time relevant, and it's also very difficult in that situation to be it's also difficult in that situation to present a message in a way that shows them that you're the right way to go whenever they are ready to talk about this thing. It's like, even if they agree to that, people, first of all, behave in all different kind of spectrum of ways. I guess what I'm really trying to say here is that this system is really just what's happening right now. This isn't my system. This isn't anything like that. This is just how people are behaving these days. And what I'm doing is creating systems to put the lead generation back in the hands of you so that you can, and that's what iFunnel is about. That's what my efforts really are about right now, is that now I've recognized this, that first of all, I'm helping people understand the application of it, and then also allowing them to create systems or have systems in place to be able to do this in-house in a way where you don't have to rely on other people. Because the problem is that even these companies that sell mortgage leads or do whatever, they're not finding intent-based traffic. And that's the name of the game for all of this, is to it's definitely a steep learning curve. I try to break it down as simple as possible. Really, every aspect of it is pretty simple at the end of the day. If you really look at it, and it's important to tell yourself throughout, and I've had to do this as well. I had this advice not too far back, but it was like, tell yourself that things are easy as you're doing them, because the problem is your brain tries to say that it's harder than it is because it's something new. But it's not necessarily difficult. It's just that sometimes the brain is more inclined to do something that we feel comfortable with versus something that will allow us to be successful. And in doing something new, it's difficult to be, comfortable in the situation. So it's important to have some type of reminder that constantly is telling yourself this is easy. You're not really doing anything here that's complicated in any kind of doing things one at a time kind of way. I mean, the overall picture does require a little direction and some strategy, but there's not anything, if you were to break this down, that is super complicated. The chatbot thing can be a little interesting to figure out, but once you do, it's not that big of a deal. It really just takes some. Part of the problem with the chatbot is that the platforms can be a little light on having direction. And so a lot of it's been trial and error for me to figure it out. I just mess around with it, make them for myself, make them for other people. I just try to use them as much as possible to get familiar with the capabilities of them. But the situation really just comes down to understanding that none of it is too complicated if you have proper direction, and really the idea is to optimize everything that you are capable of optimizing, do the things that you do have control over, and then just understand that that ultimately that's what you have to work with, is the things that you do have control over, which really at the end of the day is questionable to begin with. Probably not the avenue to have that conversation, but it's like arguably you have control over your mindset, your attitude, and what you're spending your attention on. And it's important to recognize that, because a lot of times if we get caught up in this mindset of being frustrated with what anybody's doing, or not showing up or deleting our 80 slides that we made for the presentation or whatever, then we lose track of understanding that things are what they are on some level, and that being frustrated over something that once it's done, it is what it is. We get ourselves in this pattern of not doing what we continue to need to be doing to make this work. And it's really just about creating these habits. We have to have the direction. And if you find things that you can do that you can figure out in here, then if you do it consistently, then this will work. So the chatbot's good for the pre-qual and for the yes, it's good for all of that. The high quality, that's really the thing, is like the person that wins any kind of advertising, lead generation, anything on search engines specifically, is the person who can either create content that answers questions in a way that, well, that's not really the advertising part, but search engine traffic in general is really about who can obtain this information, who can obtain this attention share of the entire audience, search audience. But in order to do that, for the advertising side of things, it's really about who can, because there are ways to craft more relevant ads. A lot of times the bigger companies really aren't even that great at doing that. They just have ginormous budgets. So in spending a lot more, they end up compensating probably for some of the less relevant things that they're doing. But the thing to consider there is that really you can copy what those companies are doing. So on SEMrush, you can find the exact campaigns that these companies are running, and essentially you can copy them you wouldn't want to copy them exactly, because you don't want to run something that somebody else is doing. But you can go through and you can mimic the style and the approach that they take, and see exactly what ads are running, what they say, what the intent is, what their call to action is. You can really hone in on the structure and strategy that any of the big companies are using. And essentially, if that's all you did was kind of make these adjustments to the way that your intent and structure and the wording of your offers, call to action, etc., are set up, and you just use the targeting that the bigger companies had, then it comes down to the situation of whoever can pay the most for business is the one that will come up on top. Because if the business is worth more to you, or if you have a different way of converting it, then it becomes this thing that's different. But ultimately, you have the same type of value proposition, call to action, unless you come up with something different to use. But the important thing to understand there is that it's basically transparent. You can find all of the details of any kind of campaign that's set up from any bigger company, and you can copy it. But the high quality leads will ultimately be found from search traffic, paid, unpaid. People who are showing intent are the ones to, yeah, what's that? What's your question? Are the ones to target. Yeah, the 80 slides was a It was about 10 minutes, 15 minutes before. And as I was exporting it, I found myself with only the first slide of the campaign, or not the campaign, yeah, it was crazy. I just looked at my screen in disbelief as the clock approached the noon timeline. And this is actually a really cool presentation. If you guys end up making any presentations, I recommend it, except for I learned an important lesson here, and that is in regard to the fact that I have one slide on here now. And if I would have used, my Office 365 subscription, then I could have avoided that whole thing. How much is reasonable spend per lead with best practices? Room spinning feeling. Yeah, room spinning feeling for sure. I didn't know really how to react, respond. Per lead, it really just comes down to your setup. Somebody who works at home that has no overhead, and it really just depends on what the bigger companies also have this ginormous overhead situation. So it's important to understand that, because essentially however much they're spending per lead is something that really, if you figured it out and you did it right, you could spend more, and you don't have the overhead of all these employees that they have. So there's ways to if you could afford to spend the money on it, because really the situation is, if you find a campaign, and really it's a sales funnel, marketing funnel, whatever you want to call it. If you find a campaign that whenever you put in $1, you get out $2, then it's like, how much money would you spend on that if you knew that you have a campaign that did that? And if you said you would spend, $5 billion, then that would be a good answer, because if you have something that's working, then you don't have an ad budget, because you can spend however much money you want on the front end, and you know that you're getting it back on the back end. But if you spend $1 and you get back $2, and you have employees and all these things that you're doing in the process, then those are real costs that are not being figured in whenever we say Quicken Loans, dominates this search situation and all the search traffic. It's like they do, but they're also spending way more money in overhead than determine ROI, because at the end of the day, they're more competitive on their ad spend, but they also got this ROI situation figured out, and they know what they're going to get back whenever they spend this amount of money. And if you were able to outbid all of their stuff, which is easy to see what ads that they're bidding on, or see what words they're bidding on and what landing pages they're using, that's not a challenge. You just plug in the keywords on SEMrush, and it'll give it to you immediately. But you could outbid them all day long on deals if you were capable of following their entire campaign at however many millions of dollars it is per month to run. But that's kind of the name of that situation. It's just really kind of about understanding your costs, and the ROI is really the bigger situation. But I mean, if people recognize that they could spend as much money as Quicken Loans, if they scaled it slowly and did so in this methodical way, where it starts off with less expensive keywords and moves up, then it would start to become clear that Quicken Loans really isn't even in an ideal situation to dominate the market, because they spend so much money on overhead that their ability to be competitive is tremendously diminished. You could You know, if you had the capacity to advertise on the same scale that they did and just copy their methods, then you would find yourself quickly in a position where it would become worthwhile. No, there's some companies that will do situations that are crazy where they don't make any sense. They're putting themselves in the red for, you know, and I'm not saying that that's what's happening here. I'd be surprised, but you know, it is possible. And there's a lot of times companies that will do this will be more in a position to upsell. So they'll have like a less expensive offer, and then they'll upsell it after after becoming a customer. That's not the situation in the mortgage business. So it's hard to say that why they would have a purpose for doing that, but that is something that does exist. $5 per lead for Google leads? Probably not. Not unless you're creating content. You could probably do it all day. You could definitely do it all day. You're caught because then you're just considering your cost of your hosting and your domain name. And if you're creating, if there's a way to do it so that you could do it yourself, but it ultimately comes down to how much money are you spending? What are you spending your time on? And are those the highest value activities that you could be doing? And it's hard to evaluate that sometimes. Yeah, not $5. In fact, sometimes on Google they can be as high as $100. They can be $80, $100. And I know on, but not always. I mean, it really just comes down to a situation where what are we comparing? What are we comparing in terms of actual cost to actual revenue gains as a result? And just looking at the ad spend, I mean, that's what most people want because it's a quick way to go about it with the least amount of work. It's crucial to find a way to do it for yourself, though, essentially. You guys have anything else? Glad you guys could join me for the pre-Memorial Day weekend situation going on today. I am going to be laying low, probably checking on my status of my slides. I'm kind of bummed, but life goes on. It's just how it goes sometimes. I'll try not to dwell too much on my situation that's happened there. Okay, yeah, I'll give you a shout. If you guys don't have anything else, I'm going to get off here, and hopefully you've gotten your money's worth in terms of time. Again, I definitely appreciate showing up. I have the services and the information / services discounted throughout today. Again, whether you do it or not is okay. I'm just basically on this trajectory where I'm kind of launching this information about the iFunnel setup, and really your involvement here will directly translate into that. In fact, as coming on now, I don't know how long it'll take, so I don't really want to make promises like I don't even want to really mention any including in that. But you're essentially getting on the ground floor of what I'm doing with that. So anything that any participation that you have here, you will have the capacity to any situation that you have here, you'll basically be included in any activities I have there. I don't know. I'll probably give you lifetime membership on the iFunnel. I just don't really want to throw that in as a magnet because I don't know how long it'll take ultimately, and I don't want to give you this situation where you feel like I'm trying to lead you on for doing that because I don't know how long it'll take. But I will be including something like that as well. It's a situation where high ticket lead generation is very disconnected in terms of what's involved, and there's not really a lot of motivation to change that because the people who get involved that know how to do what I do, if this is more complicated than almost any kind of lead generation can be due to the disconnected nature of it. The people who know how to do this kind of lead generation generally don't stick around, in my experience, with this kind of business because there's not really a lot that can be more. I mean, I saw a thing yesterday for some software that goes in jets that's like some type of, there's some business to business situations that are very particular use cases where it's like, how do you catch somebody in this, where they manufacture jets and you're trying to get them at this right time in their thing where they're buying these software programs. And it's funny to think about, but everything's relative. So essentially that's kind of the consideration here is just that there's not really a lot of common products that are more complicated just due to the way that people have changed their buying behavior and the way that they spend their attention. But with that being understood, it makes it more complicated and more involved for people who know how to do it to have a motivation to get them to continue being involved. And as a result, the situations that I've discovered are not something that most people want to get involved in. So it would be a lot easier to do other things. And it's just, there's a lot of things that people can buy on a much greater timeline, including houses. It's just that the mortgage part of it is just such a small window of opportunity that exists that it really has to just be kind of looked at it. Really, the window of opportunity is the best way. Somebody might go 2 years without hiring a realtor, and they ultimately are finally shown a property, and they have this situation that happens where it makes sense to start looking at a mortgage or fill out a loan app. But prior to that happening, people were looking for the house, and once they find the house, they're looking for the mortgage, and then they're back to moving into the house. It's not a situation where people are spending more time than they have to in general. And so that's kind of the key takeaway here. And I'll give you a call anytime, sometime this weekend, Alex. And if you guys have any other questions, just feel free to holler at me. I'm going to get off here. I actually really have to use the restroom, and I'm going to go pee. So I don't think I have anything else to say for the moment. I do have a lot more content that will come in these courses, and looking forward to working with you guys. If you have any further questions, just feel free to reach out, and I will talk to you guys soon. Thank you for joining me.